Hello, everyone. My name is Itzel, and I am here to provide interpretation services. These interpretation services will be simultaneous. We are here because the organizers of this event have made a commitment to language justice. We want to make sure that everyone in this meeting is able to listen and be heard from the language of their heart. In order to use this interpretation services, we will use the Zoom interpretation, and to access this, you will see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen. Once you click on this icon, you have the options of either choosing the English or the language channel. This is the channel in which you would like to listen or participate in during the meeting. If you have any questions, please let us know in the chat and we will be happy to help you. Thank you. Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Itzel y estoy aquí con mi compañera Diana. Estamos aquí para dar servicios de interpretación simultánea. Estamos aquí porque los organizadores de este evento se han comprometido con la justicia del lenguaje. Queremos asegurarnos de que cada persona presente en esta reunión pueda escuchar y ser escuchada en el idioma de su corazón. Para poder usar estos servicios, va a buscar un icono de un mundo en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Cuando le haga clic a este icono, va a tener las opciones entre español o inglés. Este es el canal en el que le gustaría escuchar y ser escuchado durante la reunión. Si en algún momento tiene alguna pregunta, por favor déjenos saber en el chat y estamos felices de ayudarle. Gracias.
Test. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Very good.
Thank you.
Catherine, do you want to announce that you're working on an audio system?
Yeah, we are working on an audio system and that's been ordered and hopefully we'll be here in the next several months.
Yeah, so just so everybody knows, we got this feedback, of course, Rich Allen at the end of our meeting last time said, hey, I told you the first thing when I met him was that we needed to do something about the audio. So these microphones only project to the recording. It's a separate system to go into these. We have purchased a system that will allow us to amplify into these and go into the technology. So it's been ordered and will be here soon. So thank you for your patience and understanding as we power through trying to speak really loudly for our multiple audiences.
All right, our next business in order is the superintendent report by Chief Park and Director Fairbanks, who have joined us up at the table.
Well, hello. It's nice to be here and I'm excited to share with you an update on the Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Education Department, along with the Access 2.0 results from 2022 in January and February. Oops, there we go. Our most passionate outcome in our department is to collaborate and communicate with our colleagues about high quality programming and instruction. Every time that we meet, that's what we do. And if we're not meeting about high quality programming and instruction, then we don't need to meet. And it's just a pleasure working with this group of educators. They're experts at what they do and they're very committed and devoted to their students. So who are our students? Our students are born in several places, but most of our students are born in the United States, followed by El Salvador and Mexico, and 185 other students across 40 other countries. We do have some that were unknown, but that's due to a transition of our new school into our system, so we're not sure. It's very touchy, my little clicker. Our home languages in our district are Spanish and English and 19 other languages. Those 19 other languages are represented by 49 students. And this data does include pre-kindergarten. As you can see, we're about 50-50, and every year it kind of fluctuates. Like one year, we have more Spanish-speaking families than we do English-speaking. We give or take one percentage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, gosh, I'm so sorry about the clicker. I'm going to take the Spanish and the 19 other languages, and I'm going to break that down for you so you can see the language proficiency levels of that big group. So on the left are the English, that's 50.9%, and then the other half is our families with languages other than English at home. When we break that down, there's about 23% are new or in the middle stages of learning English. That's what NEP and LEP mean. I want you to remember that blue piece of the pie because I'm going to talk about that pie later. And then the red piece, the M1 and M2, that's when our students reach English language proficiency, fluency, and we monitor them for 2 years to make sure that they're performing comparable to their native English speaking peers. We also have students who then formally exit the program after 2 years of monitoring. And they also, after like 5 years after exiting, we call them former English learners. So that's the yellow piece of the pie. And the green piece of the pie is float, which means primary home language other than English. And those are our students who come to school fluent in English and have fluency in another language at home. And they didn't need English language development support. So that's the whole range right there. So what I'm going to show you next is the data just for the blue piece of the pie. Those are the students who take the access test every year. So this is the access median growth percentile. And in the state of Colorado, this year they had 2 cohorts. One cohort called the cohort is how they usually determine the growth score. Nothing has changed. But the baseline takes into consideration the pandemic. And so it kind of goes down when you consider the impacts that the pandemic had. But regardless, Roaring Fork Schools is performing above the state in median growth percentiles. The range of our schools are at the bottom. NA means that 2 of our schools did not have enough students taking the access test to have a median growth percentile assigned to it. But the range goes from 37 to 81. That's a big range. So our median is right there at 57. This is the overall performance. So our students get a score between 1 to 6 overall. 1 is like you're new to English and 6 is like you're fluent in English. The red represents level 1, the orange 2, and the yellow 3. The green bands represent level 4. At level 4, we start to gather a body of evidence to prove that they're fluent in English, and then that's when they move to that red band called M1 and M2, the monitor students, where we monitor them for 2 years. So that's why that band's little, is because we're moving them out of the program. The big yellow band, I want you to remember, because our goals are around that band. It's the bigger band. They have a bigger percentage of students across the board, with the exception of kindergarten, because lots of our kindergartens are brand new. This is the growth scores by grade level. Green means typical growth and blue means exceptional or high growth. As you can see, our students are really performing well, with most of them having typical or high growth on access. When we compare that kind of growth with other school districts who have 1,000 or more emerging bilingual students who took the access, there are only 3 other districts who had a higher median growth percentile than Roaring Fork Schools. But it's not just, we shouldn't just look at similar numbers, but we should look at similar percentages of students. So when I pull up the percentages of students, we have 36.5% who took the access in January, compared to lower percentages of students from the districts who performed better than us. So that says to me, we're doing really well. When I take out the percentages of the school districts with similar percentages of emerging bilingual students, Roaring Fork Schools is outperforming all of them, and not by a little bit. So how are we getting those results? We have various program models in our district. We have literacy-based English language development in our traditional English schools. We also have dual language schools, and we have Spanish literacy and Spanish language arts and others in our like high schools and in the middle school. And we have other elements, like we have coaching going on with ELD coaches and experts who plan with teachers outside of ELD in math and science and social studies, which really impacts the rest of the day. So our program isn't just 45 minutes of English language development. It is an all-day endeavor, and everybody has taken the responsibility to ensure equitable education for our students. Our CLDE programming looks like this. We have bilingual education and we have English programs. In our bilingual education, we have dual language programs at BES and Riverview, and we offer Spanish literacy or Spanish language arts and English at other schools. For example, at Fiscal Middle School, they have dual language classes in math. So they have math and Spanish and English, and they also offer English language arts and Spanish language arts. At Glenwood Springs Elementary School, we are starting to grow a biliteracy program. And at our high schools, we offer Spanish language arts and English language development. Our English programs focus on literacy-based ELD2, and the names of those schools are up there. I'm happy to say our new member to our school community, Two Rivers Community Schools, offers literacy-based ELD, but right now only for 6th through 8th grade. And the rest of the day for those English programs is in English. And the rest of the day for our dual language programs is both 50% in English and 50% in Spanish. Some major elements that are at play are we have those ELD coaches at 8 of our schools. We have co-teaching happening at 5 of our schools. And we have newcomer cohorts specifically designed to help our newcomer students at 11 of our schools. What we all center around is a high quality programming and instruction. These are the categories of our common components that drive what we do. And underneath each of those categories are specific look-fors or elements that we use when we're doing our program reviews. Our annual program reviews are based on Supreme Court law, which has us examine what we do for our students using a 3-pronged test. 1 is what we're doing educationally sound and research-based. 2 is, are we effectively implementing it? And 3, what are the results that we're getting and we need to plan for improvement? All of our plans include a goal for our English language development team. If there's Spanish literacy and language arts, there's a team goal for that. And then there's a rest of the day goal. So the whole school is taking on a goal for our emerging bilingual students. And our dual language schools also have a goal that's aligned with the guiding principles for dual language education. Our CLDE department goal this year is to improve our access median growth percentile by 5 median growth percentiles in all grades and in all schools, but we're specifically focusing on that yellow band that I showed you earlier, that level 3s. Those are the students who take longer to get out of level 3. It takes about 3 years. So we're really focusing on that group. We want to focus on the group of students who have been in the program 7 or more years, and we want to focus on the group who's been in program for 5 to 6, so that they, it's called LTEL status, means that they've been in the program for 7 or more years, and we want to help them move before that. Our district does not have an LTEL problem. There's only about 2% of that blue pie are considered LTELs. So it's a very small number, but our bigger number is the 5 or 6 years, and that's the group we want to focus on. So we want to focus on moving our students from one level to the next and moving about 75% of them. And we're going to do that this year and last year. We have been focusing on formative language assessments, where the teachers are moving through 4 steps when they meet together each month. They're designing and teaching and gathering student language samples. They're analyzing them, and then they're deciding what's the best feedback to give this to the students so that they can move to the next level. And that's what we've been doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Nope. Okay. Nothing. Right, thank you. Good evening, directors. Tonight I'll be presenting the highlights of our district unified improvement plan. And I just want to note that in the spirit of continuous improvement, we're going to iterate this plan based on questions and comments and feedback from you all, and then any additional analysis that are described as our implementation signals adjustments that need to be made. So first, after there it is, just touch. After some reflection on prior year's plan sorry,
Do you want me to do it?
touch it? Sure, thank you. Former leadership, looking at our current performance of the data that's been shared throughout the board meetings of this year and trend analysis, there are 3 major buckets we've identified as priority performance challenges, which include early literacy achievement. This is connected to our numbers of students who are reading below benchmark currently on DIBELS and EDAL, and then as well as those identified as what's called SRD, or significantly reading deficient. The second big bucket is just our overall performance and growth on 3rd through 8th grade CMAS, ELA, and math, which, as you know, also includes the concerns that we have shared in the past about performance between our subgroups. And then thirdly, our disparities in performance and growth between our subgroups on our PSAT. And what I also want to say is that we know there are, of course, other measures that signify and inform student success and achievement, but we also have an opportunity to consider how our work this year will move the needle on these end of year measures. So after a lot of conversation with our teams, our leaders, we've identified some key root causes that may be at the root of why we're at this space with our performance challenges. And some of them are listed here, and they include what I want to say, both ownership at the district level and the school level. Because as a district, I believe we can do more to support our students, our teachers, and our leaders by addressing these identified root causes. In particular, examining how we're supporting and better aligning our curricular support, whether it's through the supported PD as we adopt new curriculum, how we are implementing that and continuing that throughout the multiple stages of implementation. As a district, how we're tightening up our MTSS framework supports and practices, and also providing resources to support our students who are in need of much more acceleration. We also recognize an opportunity to strengthen our data systems and practices. There are strong practices happening in many places, and there's strengthening that we can definitely do to make it a more consistent practice. And also the structures to support our subpopulations, including our emerging bilingual students. That it includes professional development, Nellis's continued work with Director Fairbanks as well and her team, and making sure that we're really intentionally targeting our support. Looking at those root causes, it informs this opportunity. And so I also want to say, as a district, we recognize and see an opportunity to elevate the performance of all of our students and the achievement of our subgroups, which we have previously identified as points of concern. And so 3 of our major improvement strategies are to ensure that students have access to rigorous grade level content and can actually authentically engage with it. And so the access piece includes support such as, for example, tiered interventions if they are currently struggling to access the tier 1 instruction, and that would be in addition to, not in place of, the tier 1 instruction. It also, that practice of response intervention connects to our district-wide understanding, leadership, and support for MTSS framework and response intervention. And then finally, we recognize many talented teachers and leaders in our schools and an opportunity to support our newer teachers or leaders in implementing strong instructional practices in the classroom to make sure that every day is one where students are experiencing strong instruction in front of them. Let's get one. Back up. In terms of our annual targets, our overall at every grade level, in every content area, is that for all students at a minimum is to grow by a year. This might look like students who at the end of last year on a particular state measure might have fallen into did not meets, and they would move into partially proficient. We believe that that is feasible to have as a goal for every student, that they're moving from their current performance band to their next performance band. It might mean that students who are currently at meets moves into the exceeds band. And though this means that the specific grade, school, and assessment percentages of students who then end up at the end of the year meeting or exceeding benchmark might vary because the schools are at different starting points. I think we as a district can make a really collective effort to make sure that all of our students are making substantial progress and growth. Also added in for our access, as Director Fairbanks also included, to improve the access median growth percentile, especially for that particular group of students, by 5 points, MGBG points in all grades. So we shared this plan high level with our district accountability committee and have interim measures to be monitored throughout the year. And that's inclusive of some internal measures, whether there's local assessments, end of module assessments, as well as some ones that we have district-wide, which include DIBELS and NWEA. And look forward to sharing an update with the board at regular intervals at a minimum in January after we have our mid-year assessments, and then in the spring after our spring assessments as well. Yep, and then it's time for questions.
Thank you. So it's now time for board discussion. Each board member will have 1 minute to ask your initial questions or share comments. After each board member has shared, there will be 5 minutes of open discussion, followed by another round of board questions and comments. And tonight we will begin with Director Torres.
Thank you. Well, first, thank you. We had an opportunity when Director Kenny Tytler and I were at Roaring High School to go into a CLD classroom. And it was an amazing experience, and I could tell the students were really engaged. So I was really excited that we got an opportunity to do that. In regards to the Unified Improvement Plan, under the identified root causes, I see that there was discussion with school leadership, classroom observation, and I'm wondering, was there also an opportunity in, and we've all gone through these student-led conferences, or we're going through them right now, to also engage parents? If there was a chance, because we went over some NWEA results and some CMAS results, to also get feedback on perhaps the decreased student engagement piece. I just think that there, could be some opportunities there with hearing from parents, and especially if you're there for a parent-teacher conference or a student-led conference, rather. It seems like a really great time. So, thank you.
Thank you. Do I answer?
Yes.
Great. Appreciate that. I would like to go deeper and actually hear from more parents. The extent so far has been through informal conversations or through the district accountability committee. I also joined a school accountability committee meeting yesterday to learn a little bit more about what families highlights are and actually what their concerns are. But I do think that there is an opportunity to get to learn more. So that is one where we'll read. Thank you. Thank you.
Director Stepp.
Oh.
Oh, usually go
But that's-
around the.
That's
table.
fine. We can go there.
Okay, sorry. It's fine. Director Tytler. Sorry, change in seating.
Thank you for your presentations. I have a question for you, Director Fairbanks. First of all, congratulations on your access scores, and I know they continue to be good year to year, and you've continued to have such great results. My question is, what is the disparity? Because we keep having these great access results, but we continue to be behind for Latinos in CMAS and SAT. Can you talk to why it seems like we're behind as a whole in CMAS and PSAT and SAT, but ahead in access scores?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's really important to know that the text construct of the access test is different than the text construct of other tests. They're measuring different things. So, and they're looking at, for example, the access test is looking at language development across 6 proficiency levels. And our CMAS is looking at something different. And so the scores aren't going to necessarily indicate one or the other. What is a good predictor, though, is the more fluent you are in English, the better you're going to do in an exam like the other exams.
Great. And Dr. Park, I had a couple of questions. First of all, my first one is, you talked about that we're looking at doing more tier 2, but not in place of tier 1. How are you finding that extra time to do the tier 1 and then also have tier 2?
That is a great question, and that is actually one of the things that when we examine our structures to see if if there are any potential schedule adjustments we need to make to allow that time.
And then my last question is, there was the mention of 100% of our students moving performance bands. That's a great target, but like, do we have like a goal? Because I can't imagine we're actually imagining they're all going to move 100%. Like, so do we have like a specific goal?
Yep, and that varies by school, by grade and subject because of the numbers of kids who currently are, let's say, performing at meets or exceeds. And one thing our leaders have done a great job with is with teachers looking at the student level data to better understand where in that band students are performing, and so what it might mean for individual students to make the shift from one band to the other.
Thank you.
Director Stepp.
Yeah, thank you both for your presentation. I always love looking at the data and trying to analyze it. I would like to hear more in the future about how teachers incorporate those language development skills in other subjects, right? So they have so much that they have to get through the curriculum to teach their subject, and how that, and I know you talked about professional development for them, but it's, it's another thing that they have to do. But have we looked at like after school programs to help with language development at all? Or is that some like an additional tool to help that, so it's not always in the classroom? Or I don't know, it's just a thought.
Yeah, well, our coaches do a really good job at working with teachers who to help them incorporate like sensory, graphic, and interactive supports to help make the content more comprehensible. And they plan with teachers, and they also plan with small teams of teachers, like content area teams or grade level teams. And that is really makes a difference, because if you plan for the emerging bilingual student, you generally hit everybody.
I was gonna say that would be
But
good
if
for
you
everybody.
if you don't, then our emerging bilingual students miss out, and that's not okay.
Yeah.
So our coaches are there to help with that. If students need extra support, I know that you have been looking at tutoring for some of our students to help accelerate their learning in these next couple of years as a possibility. So we are exploring that.
And then I thought I had heard, it was actually when we toured Glenwood High School, that they planned for so many ELD coaches or teachers, but then the numbers of students was beyond that. And so having enough coaches available to students or support for the other teachers will be important going forward. So if it's a district level backfill or something.
Yeah, because most of our coaches are 0.5 in a building, or they're just 1 in the building. Of course, the more the better, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Can support more teachers that way.
Thank you.
Director Ramirez.
Thank you. Thank you both. Director Fairbanks, do we have a timeline on when we will have that data on the 389 students whom we don't know their country of birth?
I don't know when we would get their place of birth. It depends on how they transfer all that information into Infinite Campus. Maybe they're working on it right now. I'm not sure. I can't answer that.
Okay. Yeah, I ask because I do feel it's urgent, especially as we start having these conversations on belonging. I do think it's important for us to make that concerted effort to find out where our students, not only where their country of birth is, but what their culture is. I think it's really important.
I agree.
I also wanted to ask on your graph in regards to the programming, the literacy-based ELD, is that the seal by literacy?
No, that's how it's English language development, and it's taught based on authentic literature. So it's text-based first, and then added oracy and meta language, like the language to talk about the text and the language to talk about language. So it's the program model to teach English.
Okay.
It's different than like a traditional English as a second language program.
So then does Seal of Biliteracy not fall under CLD program?
The Seal of Biliteracy is awarded to students. It doesn't matter if they're in CLDE programming or not. It's open to all students and all languages. So I just got 2 emails about getting the seal in Japanese, and what was the other language? I can't recall it offhand, but there were 2 different languages other than Spanish. So it's open to everybody. The seal is for everybody.
Okay. I think that'd be a good opportunity for us to make a concerted effort to promote that. I definitely think in the past we have been made aware of it, but I definitely was under the assumption it fell under this.
Yeah, I'd love to come back and share with you the numbers of students who have received the Seal of Biliteracy over the course of the last few years.
Thank you both very much for your presentation. I have just a couple questions. On one of the first slides, you presented the range of scores from 37 to 81. Are each of those scores at a particular school within our district?
Yes.
Okay. And so do we see, and I'm sure this is a difficult question to answer, but are there higher rates of growth using one program or one type of program over another? Are we seeing different results based on the programming in the schools?
I think it has to do not with the programming, but those other elements that are at play. Some of our schools that do really well have a lot of elements all all there. So there's bilingual education, there's a coach, there's a cohort, there's co-teaching going on, and they're all there. And that's where we see the highest growth.
Okay. Is there a way we could get that information just to know which scores?
Yeah, you can go
relate
to
which
the
schools?
school dashboard on CDE's website and you can look up any school and see what they got.
Thanks. And then my other question was similar to, I don't forget which director asked about targets. I really appreciate seeing concrete targets in the UIP, and I think that's super important. And my question was around, is it realistic or achievable to have 100% of our students making that level of growth, making those jumps? We're talking a little bit more about goals, and if there are separate goals, can we have access to that data so that we can see what the more realistic targets and goals are?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. We now have 5 minutes of open discussion amongst the board directors. So if anybody wants to kick us off, go for it.
I don't mind going. I just wanted to mention that, especially with us having all of our parents and community here, that it, I think, is a good concerted effort from our team this year to be making sure that all of our schools have their UIP not only up to date, but posted. And I just want to remind everyone that you can find these online for every school, including the district, at any time on the CDE website. And I had the opportunity to go to my school's school accountability committee, although they named it something else. And I think, being able to receive a document that says what our role as parents is in making sure that our school is kept accountable, I think it was really important. So thank you, because I know, Kelsey, you had a lot to do with making sure schools got this. So kudos to the team, Stacy, for you guys updating and having goals for our UIP.
Kelsey, can you make sure our time is running? I know, it's great. Maureen, or sorry,
Yeah.
Director Stepp.
I lost my thought. So I love that we're focusing on student success, and that should be at the forefront of every conversation. And you brought that up at the beginning of your presentation. If it's not about that, then why are we even having a conversation? So I applaud you all for having that. And this is the first time in 3 years that we've had this in-depth discussion on the UIP, which is awesome as well. So I'm hoping that this dedication and focus trickles down to all the school levels. And then, we hope to hear in the future more about their specific plans and how they're moving the needle. So thank you.
I guess I would just like to have a little bit more conversation about this tier 1 versus tier 2. I don't know how much we're familiar as a board on what tier 1 and tier 2 is, but it seems like if we're looking at having more tier 2, there has to be more time somewhere, because if we're saying we're not taking away from tier 1 to give tier 2, then where is that time coming from? Because if they're in tier 2, they're missing something from tier 1 time. And so it seems like if we're looking at really doing tier 2 and not taking away from tier 1, we need to look at some extra time somewhere. And so I know Director Stepp, you were talking about like some kind of after school programming. And it seems like if we're looking at really not taking away, that we need to perhaps look at, as Dr. Park was mentioning, more tutoring time or something. But it seems like time is always the issue of how do we figure that out, because if you are given tier 2 instruction, that is within the school day inherently being taken away from tier 1 time. And so I guess a discussion on where we're going to find that more time as a board and as a district, I think, is important.
And can I just ask a follow-up to that? That is also looking at not taking away from opportunities for, social studies or math or other education development,
Yeah.
right? Because if there's a huge focus on language development, we don't want that to then supersede the importance of science and math and the other areas of growth in academics that we want to also see, and what we're saying, which would be on the SATs, on all these other scores that identify academic growth and success.
Is
So
where
that
the-
after school tutoring, right? That would
Yeah.
be,
Sorry.
no, go ahead, sorry.
Is that where the team teaching comes in? Like you have both an English and a Spanish teacher, like in a core content area? Or is that only in the dual language
No,
schools?
it's, co-teaching is usually like at the high school or middle school in a core content area with an ELD teacher and then the content area teacher.
We have a lot of that going on.
No, only in 5 schools.
So that's an area where we could focus maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, it just takes a lot of human resources though.
But
Which we
that-
know are out
That
there.
is important, but it's still not given this extra tier 2, or if it is given the tier 2, it's taken away still from that. The time is still the issue of like, where's that time coming from for my understanding of it.
And I think the question for us as a board is how do we support district staff in making that happen? So
Mhm.
raising these issues and figuring out what our role is and ensuring that you all have the resources that you need to achieve these goals and targets. Just a reminder that during the discussion time, we're not supposed to be interacting with our presenters. We have to hold that for question time. It's
Oops.
new structure, I know. It's tough. Any other last comments during discussion time?
I would just like to add one more issue on, not issue, one more topic on time is when teachers are talking, that is always like the number one thing that they're talking about is where do I find the time? And so I do think that is a discussion that we need to continue to engage in.
Okay, so we have one more round of 1 minute each for board members to ask questions of Chief Park and Director Fairbanks. And this time we'll start with Director Ramirez.
Thank you. Yes. Chief Park, for the school accountability committees and the district accountability committees, to Director Torres's point of using our back to school conferences, what is the efforts that we're doing now to make sure that we're promoting school accountability committee and district accountability committees to our district families?
Yep. In terms of the communication about open membership from the district accountability committee, it's been communicated out to families in an open invitation, specifically with lines that include, we are seeking new members to join the DAC. Schools have communicated not just obviously the time and place of their own school accountability committees, but also especially if they're trying to get more membership or I think learn about like what might be barriers that exist to attending or holding folks back from attending a school accountability committee meeting. I still think there's an opportunity, especially with our district accountability committee, to ensure that it's representative in the way that is of our district.
Do our individual schools have ownership over making sure that they have representation within their school accountability committees?
Yes.
That was it for me. Thank you.
Director Tytler.
Dr. Park, you had mentioned that there's some kind of tutoring program or.
It's an exploration. Yes. So, and I think, yes, it's an exploration as one idea. I think for the question of where is their time, I recognize that it's not necessarily asking everyone to do more, but think differently about the time. And so whether it is a block where students are getting what they need, and that might be a combination of acceleration or intervention or elective. So they're not necessarily missing a core block, but it is a time where students are getting what they need, as an example. We're exploring tutoring as an idea. There is some in at a small scale right now, but thinking about how we're actually expanding that.
Great.
broadly.
And then my other question is on our major improvement strategies that you were talking about. One is about professional development, and I was wondering if you can talk to of how there's been any kind of communication with teachers on what they would like to see for professional development, because I know there's often a time where teachers feel like their professional development time is not well used and they feel not greatly respected in their time after these professional developments. And so what kind of things are happening there for bringing in the teachers?
Yep, we do give a survey after every one of the district ones to ask that question. What was effective? What would you like to see in future district-wide sessions?
Thank you.
Director Torres?
Yes, so I had a question about the language status slide that was shown earlier, and that specifically the 22.8% of the NEP, LEP new to English or in the middle stages. With that being new to English, is that a pretty like good average, or some years higher than that 22%? Or
Yeah.
is that pretty much?
It fluctuates throughout the year. So like our access score from 2022 in January and February, we had a considerable, it was like 36%.
Okay, that
So it
sounds
just
great.
changes throughout the year. This was taken on October 18th this year, and the access score, it's different percentage because it's different time of the year, different
Right.
group of people. Yeah.
Okay, but
And it
that's a pretty,
fluctuates too because
yeah.
of how we redesignate students. Depends on how many have reached fluency or not.
thank you.
Director Staff?
I don't have a question, but just we had a presentation back in last spring about the MTSS and the structure and how it all works. And I would love to see a little bit more in depth about how that's takes place in each school, like at each school level, to put those supports in place and those interventions instead of the holistic view, like how's it actually working?
Back to me. I don't have anything further. Thank you both very much for presenting, for all this information, and for engaging with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we welcome members of the public who have signed up to address the board. There are 18 speakers signed up tonight. The board typically allots 45 minutes for public comment, but tonight we've amended the agenda to allow enough time for everyone to speak who had signed up. The speakers are listed in the order that they have signed up. To respect the time of all who are present, speakers are to limit their remarks to 3 minutes or less. Reminder to all public speakers to please refrain from making complaints or negative comments regarding individual students or specific district employees. Members of the public who wish to share their views with the board may also do so in writing at any time. For this evening's public comment, we received 36 written comments. Tonight, our first speaker is John Eaton, who has come up.
I'm John Eaton. I've lived in the Valley for 42 years. I've been clean and sober for 35 years. I volunteer with Celebrate Recovery Inside in the Garfield County Jail. We have a proven track record. 90% of the inmates who honestly take this program don't return to jail. The jails love us and the courts love us because it works. Principle 1 basically states, I realize that I'm not God. Then steps 2 and 3, we find God. Steps 10 through 12, we continue to seek God and share our message with others. So God uses the same flaws that brought us to our knees, brought us closer to Him to help others with the same problem. This is how God works. He wants a personal relationship with us. When I was in rehab, they had to break me of thinking that I was God. I never said I was God, but my ego had my subconscious believing that I was God. I was playing God with very poor results. And that's my point. I found that God loves me the way that I am. And what you're telling the kids without telling the kids is that God made a mistake. And you can play God and change that mistake. And what I'm telling the kids is that God loves them just the way that they are. God doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't make junk. You believe that the solution is the problem. God is the solution. When you walk into the Garfield County Jail, there are dozens of Bibles in the library. So when people fail in our society, we give them Bibles. The Bibles work. It also predicts the future with stunning accuracy. The Bible was removed from our public schools with terrible results. Satan is having his way. Society is crumbling. What we see here before me is a board that is completely out of balance. What I see here before me is a board with a far left agenda. What we need is a workshop with 3 people on each side with the opposing views that can have civil discourse, that can work out a solution. After the last meeting, the Holy Spirit woke me up at night and many times in horror on what is being presented to these vulnerable kids. So after some searching on the internet, I found a website that's called Gender Regret. I found studies in Sweden showing an increase in the suicide rate after the change. I saw that on the news that Vanderbilt University is stopping sex change operations because of the results are in, and suicide is now higher among those who've had the operations. God also makes a promise in 2 Chronicles 7:14. He states, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sins and I will heal their land.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton. Our next speaker is Nancy Batcheldor. She signed up for the October 12th meeting and is out of town, so her husband Norm will be reading her statement.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, board. We're here for some similar reasons, actually, and it's the kids. And it's a small community. I know quite a few of you, and I think all of my kids learned under Kenny Tytler. I want to present maybe 2 ideas. And one is this notion of social construct, and it has to do with a parent responsibility to a child. And what I believe is that we're violating the social construct with what is planned, the programmatic aspects of what we're discussing, which is the toolbox of LGBTQ+. When our children are young, we know we're responsible for a lot of things. Not the least includes that they are buckled in their seatbelts. They don't run across the street when cars are coming, and we nurture them physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. What the program, as I read it, says is that it's no longer the parent responsibility. That's now the responsibility of the school district or of the staff to nurture and exclude parent involvement and the decision process. And I think that's violating the stuff that we all believe. So I guess that's probably my biggest point. And I hope that that's corrected. The last point, obviously I have very little time left, is that in my experience that there are many times that decisions are made and you find out you've got the wrong decision. My background is more in business than education, and plenty of times you go, oh shoot, that was a dumb decision. And no matter how much it cost and how much, what is even harder is not just the physical capital, but the emotional and time capital that you put in. But if it's the wrong decision, you still have to change. And that's what I'm asking you to do, is take a look again at what you're planning to do and ask what parts are really working. Do you have the data that says that works? Or does the data say that there's, as example, that the suicide rate's much higher? How can you change what you're planning to more aligned with what your goal is? Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, my wife did write a letter. It's too long to read, but may I give it
Absolutely.
to you?
Thank you. Our next speaker is Elizabeth Taylor.
I'm glad to be here in front of you all tonight to be able to express my thoughts. First of all, just so you know, my son is a new student at Roaring Fork High School. He's making a lot of new friends, and he tells me often that he really likes his teachers, so we're all happy about that. My concerns tonight are more about the new transgender policies that are being rolled out. I'm learning that it is an expanding program, and what we are being presented with right now does not express the full extent of the agenda. I'm wondering what we have in store for our students in the near future, and when will we find out what's next and what is the ultimate goal. I harbor no ill will at all in the least towards anyone who identifies as transgender. I have compassion for them, and I sincerely care about their well-being. I just have a lot of questions. I wonder about the relatively recent spike in transgender kids in the past few years. What is causing this? And regarding the increased numbers of suicides and suicidal behavior in transgender kids, is this definitely due to their not being recognized as transgender or being bullied for being transgender, or is there something else? I am for truth as well as compassion. I find it curious that popular culture feels the need to affirm and celebrate the transgender identity loudly and proudly, no questions asked, when it might help the individual to first find out what may be the underlying root cause of a body dysphoria and then treating it as such. The most compassionate thing we can do as humans is be truthful and consider that someone's transgender identity may be based on something other than a medical condition, possibly mental, emotional, or spiritual condition. Our new Assistant Secretary of Health, Dr. Rachel Levine, actively supports gender-affirming care for transgender minors, calling it empowerment. She rejects any consideration of counseling and instead pushes medical intervention. It is this type of endorsement from the top offices of the government that I find so alarming. And when I take issue with transgender policies being pushed on our kids in our schools, this is what I'm talking about. There is no mention of evaluations or therapy to find out more about the child's mental or emotional state, just the promotion of puberty blockers and hormone therapy to kids and adolescents who identify as transgender. Not only are our kids in danger of irreparable damage, the medical industries and pharmaceutical industries are raking in money hand over fist, and all of it is condoned, endorsed, and celebrated by top government officials, school officials, social media, celebrities, and doctors, and more. This is not truth and compassion.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lindsay DeFreitas.
Hello, Board. Thank you for having me this evening. I have 3 kids at Sopris Elementary, and I've lived in the Valley for about 17 years. And I was pretty tired of the conversation tonight, so I was hoping that you would allow me to offer a different tool towards parents or community members who may not understand the best thing to do when someone tells them something about themselves that they don't understand. I was hoping I could read this book as an example. It'll stay within the time. The book is called Julian is a Mermaid, and it begins with a young man on the bus with his abuela. Sometimes when it's too complicated, just get simpler. This is a boy named Julian, and this is his abuela, and those are some mermaids. Julian loves mermaids. And then we see him imagining himself becoming one. He kicks off his clothes. His hair gets longer. He's swimming. And if you've ever seen a kid swimming in a pool, it looks just like that. He imagines the fish coming. And then he imagines the tail, beautiful pink tail with yellow fins and a large fish that looks a bit like his grandma's bathing suit. Vámonos, mijo. This is our stop. The mermaids wave goodbye. He walks home. He says, Abuela, did you see the mermaids? I saw them, mijo. Abuela, at the door. I am also a mermaid. Abuela doesn't respond right away. She says, I'm going to take a bath. You be good, which always goes well. Julian has a good idea. Once again, he kicks off his clothes, his shoes, and then he goes for the potted plant. He makes himself a special headdress. He finds some flowers. He finds a little bit of lipstick. He finds the curtains and he takes them off the wall and he wears them like a beautiful skirt that looks a lot like the tail he imagined. And he has a very happy expression on his face. But Abuela comes out of the shower and Julian says, oh, uh-oh. And he looks down and he looks at himself. And the Abuela comes back and she says, come here, mijo. And she hands him a necklace of pearls. And he says, for mi abuela, for you, Julianne. And they walk out together and she's holding his hand and she looks proud of him. And they walk down the street and he says, where are we going? You'll see, says abuela. Mermaids, whispers Julianne, and they find themselves in a parade with people who look a lot like him, but also a little bit different. Like you, mi hijo, let's join them. And they do. I like this book because it's a very simple way to respond if somebody tells you something you don't understand. You respond with kindness and figure out the rest later. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jim Tarr.
You cannot be here tonight.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to Maureen Bierman.
Hi, thank you guys for letting me speak tonight. I was signed up to speak at the last board meeting and I gave up my spot to two students who are in the LGBTQ community because I think it's really important that their voices be heard first and foremost. Given that, I'm excited to see the resolution for giving priority to certain groups of speakers in future board meetings. So thank you guys for considering that as well. I'm a Roaring Fork School District parent. I am also a social scientist and educator who has researched and taught in gender, sex, and sexuality at the university level. And I'm concerned about a lot of the misinformation that we've heard tonight and at the last board meeting. These are fundamentally lies that are being perpetuated in our community with the aim of encouraging discriminatory practices. We've heard that trans and gender expansive youth are confused as a defense for avoiding referring to them with their chosen pronouns. But in fact, there's ample research, including a large longitudinal study out of Princeton University that shows that non-conforming children who eventually choose to transition do so precisely because of an already existing very strong sense of identity. In other words, we're not confusing our children, we are simply supporting them in something that they already securely know about themselves. We've heard concerns about trans and gender expansive students using bathrooms and changing rooms that align with their gender identities. These are some of the more disturbing falsehoods that are being shared about trans and gender expansive youth because they actively promote a fear-based narrative that trans youth pose some sort of fundamental threat to other students in these settings. Not only is there no evidence of this threat, there is existing evidence that there is no threat. So research has been done comparing schools that have a policy that permits students to use their bathroom of choice and schools that don't. And they find that there is no increase in any sort of violence or attacks or uncomfortable situations in restrooms, even when students are permitted to use the bathroom of their choice. Reports of privacy and safety violations in bathrooms and changing rooms are very rare, and multiple studies have found that gender inclusive policies are not correlated with increased reports of violations in these settings. And in fact, a 2018 CDC study found that trans and gender expansive youth themselves experience a much greater risk of sexual assault in schools when they're prevented from using the bathrooms or locker rooms consistent with their gender identity. So not only are they no threat, but they themselves are at threat when they're prevented from being in the bathrooms that they prefer to be in based on their gender identities. So if the goal is to protect all kids, as many of these folks here tonight and at last meeting are advocating for, then actually gender inclusive bathroom access is the way to go. We're hearing instead a fear-based narrative with no empirical grounding that actually puts trans and gender expansive kids at higher risk. I'm going to end there, but I do want to say that I would like to urge the board to adopt the resolution of support for LGBTQ+ students, not in spite of the critics here, but because of them. The louder and more persistent these voices are, the more our LGBTQ+ community needs your protection and support. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Caleb Cook.
Hello guys, my name is Caleb Cook. My pronouns are he, him, they. I'm a queer advocate and queer community member. I am here again to thank the board for their intuition to be inclusive in our schools and making our students amazing. A really cool thing I also want to share is that there's a lot of resources out there for your youth that might be in a situation where they're needing a place to be safe. So every Tuesday from 4 to 5, Glenwood and Youth Zone has a safe space. We facilitate it. And it's a great opportunity for you to find a community and to make sure that your student is being supported. You can also reach out to me if you need help navigating some amazing services in the Valley. We have tons of amazing career programs for youth. One amazing program we have is actually with the Carbondale Community Library. And it makes sure that we have visibility and access to queer-focused books. And I'm going to let Kat take the rest of my time to kind of share a little bit about that.
We do have a GSA book club. All students are welcome to come. We read books that talk about LGBTQ topics. We don't often read picture books, but I'd love to read one to you today. So we're going to do an abridged version. It's And Tango Makes Three. In the middle of New York City, there is a great big park called Central Park. Children love to play there. There's a toy boat pond where they can sail their boats, a carousel. But best of all, it has its very own zoo. Every day, families of all kinds go into the zoo to see all the different kinds of animals. Ooh. Two penguins in the penguin house were a little bit different. One was named Roy and the other was named Silo. Roy and Silo were both boys, and they did everything together. They bowed to each other, they walked together, they sang to each other, and they swam together. Wherever Roy went, Silo was soon to follow. They didn't spend much time with the girl penguins, and the girl penguins didn't spend much time with them. Mr. Grady, the caretaker, noticed the two penguins and thought to himself, they must be in love. Roy and Silo watched how the other penguins made a home, so they built a nest of stones of their own. And every night, Roy and Silo slept there together, just like the other penguin couple. And just like the other penguin couples, they put a little rock in the middle of their stew. The other ones had an egg, but they could rock. And so they did like the other penguins did as well. They sat and sat and sat and sat, but nothing was happening. Nothing happened to the rock. So Mr. Gramsci got a great idea. He found an egg that needed to be cared for, and he brought it to Roy and Silo's nest. Roy and Silo knew just what to do. They started to sit and sit and sit, and one day they squawked at the peeping squawk, squawk. And they had a beautiful little baby penguin. And Mr. Gramsci named her Tango because it takes two to tango. Thank you. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Becca Percy.
To pull it up. I'm sorry. Hello, my name is Dr. Rebecca Percy, and I am a pediatrician who serves the children of this valley. If you were here last time, my husband, Dr. Matt Percy, came and spoke to you. He said he was voluntold to come and talk and represent our family, and it's my turn at this meeting today. I'm also a mother of 4 children in the school district, and I feel there's a lot of parallels between being a pediatrician and a childcare provider and a teacher. One of the, to say, first and foremost, in our roles, we must protect the interests of the child and to do no harm. As a medical provider, one of the first things we do is to pledge to protect our patients. In my case, patients are children and the caregivers that they have. And in order to protect my patients, first and foremost, we must recognize the fundamental personhood of that child. As adults, we often think we know best, and we think we know our children better than they know themselves a lot of the time. And to an extent, children do need boundaries. I talk to parents about that all day long. But if we're gonna, but by neglecting the innate person in that child, we are diminishing their identity. And that is something we cannot know for them. We cannot tell them what their identity is. We cannot define them. And that's something we cannot override as their parent or their caregiver or their teacher. So by telling children that we can define and name their gender identity better than they can, solely because we are adults and know better, we are immediately going against our primary goal as their medical and their emotional and their physical guardians. We are doing harm to them.
and we are taking away their innate personhood. And that will cause a potentially irreparable damage in their trust in themselves and the people who are the ones who are protecting them. In 2018, the American Academy of Pediatrics released a policy statement supporting policies and laws that seek to promote acceptance of all children without fear of harassment, exclusion, or bullying because of their gender expression. And that is an evidence-based medical policy. And I have to reiterate that one more time. As a medical provider, I want to treat patients from my heart. And here, the heart and the medicine align in a policy. And the science supports that we save lives and greatly enrich other lives if we support all children within the gender diverse narrative. So one last quote from the American Academy of Pediatrics that I want to leave you with tonight is the children need our continued support and love, and those of us in the medical community stand prepared to help them. So on behalf of the pediatricians in this valley, we are prepared to stand with you to support this policy. Thank you.
Thank you. Randy Drake.
Hi, my name is Brandy Drake. I'm coming to you today as a parent of 3 in the Roaring Fork School District, also as a physician. I'm an emergency medicine doctor and also a palliative medicine doctor here and a 4th generation Garfield County resident. I'm really nervous to be up here speaking, but I really felt that it was my duty to come and speak with you today, both as a parent and as a medical provider to our society's most vulnerable, to show my support to Dr. Rodriguez and the school board and everyone who's worked tirelessly to create this toolkit to support all of our students. As a physician on the front lines during the COVID pandemic, I saw how quickly facts and science could perversely get twisted, how deadly that misinformation could be. I also saw the beauty of a lot of people coming together to protect the vulnerable in our community. I see a lot of parallels here with the frank lies, the disinformation, and the unreasonable fear that is associated with opposition to this toolkit. Another thing I learned during the pandemic is the power in story to reach those people's hearts and minds who are still open to learning, to growing, and to listening. So here's a little tiny bit of my story. One of my children is gender diverse. Now, parenting is hard for all of us. Parenting a gender non-conforming child has been the most anxiety-producing experience of my life, and I'm an ER doctor. We didn't know any gender diverse people, trans, non-binary. These were words and ideas that were new to me until my 3-year-old child became clear that the gender binary didn't work for them. So I did what scientists do. I read, I listened, I talked, I gathered information, and I found out 3 important things that the science and the data told me. I learned that the biology underlying sex and gender is much more complicated and nuanced than we have thought, and that the gender binary is a social construct that limits all of us. I also learned that my child is at risk for suicide, for mental health problems, substance abuse, homelessness. And I also learned really importantly and hopefully that the support from me, my family, my friends, my school, my community can bring my child's risk to normal. That my child need never feel dysphoric about who they are. My child is not a threat. My child wants to play, to learn, and to explore. Mostly I'm here to thank you all, possibly literally for saving my child's life, for allowing my child to a childhood, for working together with my family, with my community to create a safe space for them. So thank you for standing with the science, standing with the law, and standing with those of us families as we continue to lead this with love.
Thank you. It's Jessie Rochelle.
My name is Jessie Rochelle, and I have lived in Carbondale since 1990. I attended grades K through 12 here and spent the last 14 years working for the Carbondale Parks and Recreation Department. I currently volunteer with the local LGBTQIA advocacy group. I am here tonight to share my support for the LGBTQIA+ and transgender students, their families and friends, and their allies. And I'm here tonight to share my opinions as a community member and fellow human being. I want to remind everyone why we are here. We are here for the students, our schools and teachers, and our community. Just because we are focusing our attention on LGBTQIA+ and transgender students does not mean we are ignoring, forgetting about, or alienating all other groups. We change, evolve, and learn, and as a result, we are able to do better together. Garnering support for one community of students is not automatically at the expense of all others. When every student is seen and heard and feels validated and loved, it means all students can be seen and heard and feel validated and loved. One group advocating for understanding and rights does not concurrently strip another group of theirs. Human rights are for everyone. Like other controversial topics, this should not be an argument. It is not a fight between us on one side and them on the other. It is about listening, learning, and understanding. It is about being thoughtful, kind, and considerate. Ignoring or fighting these topics isn't going to magically make them go away. Students and people of all ages are going to continue to identify as LGBTQIA+. Remember that these are your peers, your friends' kids, your kids' friends, your neighbors, and your community. As these discussions continue here tonight and out in the world at large, I implore you to open your mind, your eyes, your ears, and your heart. Ask intelligent and thoughtful questions. Lead with curiosity, kindness, and compassion. Be on the side of progress, not prejudice. Beliefs, language, social and cultural norms, these are all just ideas that are subject to change over time. Be open to growth and positive forward movement for all people. As a school district, community, and human race, we succeed or fail together. Let's succeed. And please remember that saying you know someone who is LGBTQIA+ does not absolve you of inherent bias and homophobic thoughts and behavior. Knowing someone who identifies as gay or queer or non-binary or transgender is not the same thing as actually and actively supporting and loving those who do. To the LGBTQIA+ and transgender students, families, friends, and peers, near and far, I want you to know that you deserve to be seen. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to feel valued, appreciated, and loved. You deserve our attention and you deserve our respect. Thank you. And for those here tonight spreading messages of anything but universal love and understanding, I hope you one day learn to practice what you preach. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Stacy Adler. Stacy Adler. Not here. We'll move down the list. Next is Sherry Smith.
Good evening. I first want to thank the Roaring Fork School Board for all that you're doing to provide a safe and successful learning environment for all students. As a high school educator, I truly respect the direction that Roaring Fork School District is taking. I appreciate the opportunities that I've had to connect with some of you and some of your fellow educators in the district to explore the possibility of growing career tech programs, CTE. It's kind of my jam, love it. And I'm excited to bring more opportunities to the Valley. I truly believe that a community is stronger when we are able to come together and give back with our time and our talents. As a parent of a transgender child who went to school in this Valley, I appreciate the protective laws that the state of Colorado has to protect all students, including LGBTQ students. These laws provide students with opportunities to attend school with the gender they identify with, so that they can be supported by CHASA and be part of a team, so they are protected and don't have to face bathroom battles, and so they are respected for who they are. In short, I really want to thank the Roaring Fork School District for following Colorado law. Although all public schools in Colorado are required to follow state laws and support LGBTQ students, it's only the Roaring Fork School District right now that has been brave enough to publicly actually say, we know better, so we're actually going to do better. Roaring Fork School District and other families are aware of these best practices, and that's only going to help everybody. You are creating an inclusive environment where diverse families, staff members, and students can feel confident that they are protected and supported. So I come here today in confidence to speak up on behalf of some of the families that are quite frankly too scared to speak up. They're scared of being judged, hated, and rejected from their peers. I want to encourage these struggling families, please continue to love and support your children the best way that you know how. You know, as a parent, you know what you're doing. You know what you need to do to support your child. And to those here tonight that disagree that these families and that this district is doing all they can to support these struggling students, well, I want to encourage you, as was mentioned several times already, to follow the well-researched guidelines of the AMA, the APA, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the other 20+ health organizations that have helped families navigate this journey. And may I invite you to please get to know us, get to know these incredible children and their families. Let us all try to work together to recognize how we can encourage all students in this district to be their best selves so they too can grow up and use their time and talents to make this community an even better place than it already is. We are the adults in this room, and our children are watching and listening. So let's teach them to judge a little less, to love a little more, and respect the differences that our neighbors may have. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Erin Rigney. Erin Rigney.
Oh, Erin just texted to say that she's stuck in Aspen. She said what she was going to say.
Great.
Something I could read.
No. All right, thank you. You can always submit it online. The next speaker is Lynn Kirst.
Hi. I lived here for 40 years, and my husband, who's now deceased, was part of the school board in the 80s. So I appreciate the long hours you guys put in, because I remember those nights. But I come here in love and not hate. And I have seen my own kids go through school here, and now my grandchildren. So I would like to ask you to table and postpone your decision to study a little bit more. I'm going to read to you if you're okay with that. I ask you to dig a little deeper into all aspects related to safety and mental health, not only of this group, but also of your other students who attend this district from kindergarten through 12th grade. What strikes me concerning your new policy is that it only speaks to one people group about bullying and mental health issues. What about the rest of your students? My question to you is, why elevate, separate, and bring attention to only one people group who deserve kindness when 100% of your students who also deserve to be treated with kindness? I have witnessed kindergarten through 2nd grade teachers in Glenwood schools here smartly teach all of the students to be kind to each other across the board. And why is that different in high school or middle school? Why can't they do the same? Why can't they have an all-school assembly to tell everybody to be kind to everybody, not single out one particular people group? The good mental health of all your students should be brought to your attention and a high priority for all of you. There are other specific student groups at risk also of being rejected, isolated, discriminated against, who have not received the same attention as the group you seem to be concerned about. So I just ask you to not elevate one people group above another for this attention. All of our students need the same kindness. Nobody needs to be bullied. And I come in love. I don't come in hate, and I represent a people group of a different cloth. but we love people and we want everybody treated the same. So I just ask you to consider tabling this, dig a little deeper into the research before you make a decision of this toolkit. And that's all. Just take a little more time to research it, besides what you have heard already. Because I know this mental health issue is huge around this group. And there are more mental health issues that maybe you haven't considered.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Isa Oliver.
Hello, my name is Isa Oliver. My pronouns are he, they. I'm a Basalt alumni and a member of the LGBTQ community. I'd like to start by saying I am so proud of the school district for stepping up to support these students who largely go ignored. Stepping stones like this toolkit are paving the way for equality for everyone, cis and trans alike. I came here today to tell you a couple of my stories that hopefully lead you to recognize why this toolkit is so much bigger than something just for these schools. My first year at university, a fellow queer student was attacked by 3 men on the empty campus. Luckily, she left the hospital not long after. However, this attack not only harmed her both mentally and physically, it also harmed the entire queer community. As if it were yesterday, I can remember reading that email and all of my roommates and I rushing to take any pride pin or flag off of our bags, fear that we would be attacked next. For the next 2 weeks, there is no pride flag anywhere on campus. It is amazing how fear, mistrust, misinformation can lead people to actions of violence. And while that might not be the goal, it is the reality of the world we live in. I don't know what you all are doing in the bathroom, but I use clean feet. In the last couple of years, I have never felt safe in a bathroom. I will be watched from door to stall to sink and back out in the men's and especially in the women's. I've had things thrown at me. I've been told on numerous occasions to get out or that I was in the wrong way. I've also been yelled at for using the family bathroom when it was available because it seemed like the safest option, but apparently it wasn't. My mom has started talking to me later. She's noticed the looks I get and is doing her best to protect me, as any parent should, and for that, I am forever thankful. These are just a few of the examples of bullying and fearful encounters I have gone through after and even before coming out as trans. School should be a safe space where children can learn both academically and about themselves. This toolkit is a way for kids to feel safe and accepted at school by their peers and their teachers, no matter their differences. The youth in our schools are the future of our society. Prove to them that you support them, no matter what, by standing up and showing them, or get left behind as they change the world. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, hi, I'm Hannah Berman, and I'm here on behalf of SkiCo tonight. And we get to host the world's longest running Gay Ski Week. And last year, I got to work at the Gay Ski Week pool party, which truly everyone in this room should do at least once in their life. It is a blast. And most guys there are in their teeny tiny bikinis. But I was talking to one gentleman and he was there at 7 p.m. on the dot when the party started in a collared button down and khakis. And I was talking to him asking like, why are you here? You're 80,000 years old. And he said, I'm not trying to knock how hard it is to be gay these days, But when I was growing up, this was the 1 week a year where I could be myself in public and where I could be myself with my partner in public. And I think we owe it to all of the kids to make sure that as their parents and their teachers and their school board members or local companies, that we are ensuring that they can be themselves every single week of every single year. And I know a lot of folks have brought up that there is a higher suicide rate for trans students, and that's significant and important. But we also know that that drops significantly when those children are in communities and in families that affirm them and support them. So instead of pointing towards those kids, I think we need to make sure that we're surrounding them with that affirmation and support. So thank you all to the school board for leading on that support and affirmation. Thank you to everyone in this room for coming out in support. It means a lot to folks to have an explicit welcome. That's something that we've learned a lot about this year. So we really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Lorelei Masender. Okay, if Lorelei isn't here to speak, then we will wrap up public comment. I'm going to call for a brief 5-minute recess before we transition into our next agenda item. Thank you all for being here. 5 minutes.
My daughter's calling. I was nervous. I hit decline that I was going to answer.
Reading. Repeal of current policy DBF. Directors, are there any items that you would like to pull off the consent agenda for a separate discussion and vote? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda as is.
I second.
Call to vote?
Aye.
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 Directors, you've just approved the consent agenda. It's now time for board discussion. Each board member will have 1 minute to share any comments if you have any. We'll begin with Director Tytler.
I have no comments.
Director Torres.
No comments.
Director Stepp.
No questions.
Director Ramirez.
I just want to mention again that on one of our policies, it says that students have up to age 21 to graduate. One of the conversations that has come up quite a bit in the last 2 weeks is that we have a lot of students who are deciding to either get a GED or are transferring between our schools very frequently. So I really want to stress to our team to make sure that we are not only promoting that students have time to graduate, but that we are making a concerted effort to capture data on current student demographics, especially those who might be transferring in between our high schools, to make sure we help get them on the course to graduate with the high school diploma.
Thank you. I don't have any comments. The next business in order is action on a board resolution in support of LGBTQ plus students. And Director Torres. Let me take this one.
Well, thank you. I am both honored and I'm pleased to be the one that reads this resolution from our school board directors in our school district. So Roaring Fork School Board of Education resolution support for.
Sorry,
Do I
Director
read
Torres,
that?
before we read it, we're gonna vote on it.
Okay.
So we'll need a motion.
I move that the board approve the resolution in support of LGBTQ plus students as presented.
A second.
Now time for board discussion. Each board member will have 1 minute to share comments, and we will begin with Director Torres.
I'm going to be honored and pleased to read this resolution. I think I just really respect and honor those that have come tonight, both sides, those that have differing views can come together in one room and feel as though they have the freedom to share their opinions. And the most important thing that I think is what we're trying to come across today and throughout our time here is that every single one of them is respected and that we treat each other with respect and our students with respect. So thank you.
Director Stepp.
Yeah, I just kind of echo what Director Torres said. It's a very passionate topic on both sides, and I really appreciate those that have done a lot of the research, especially the parents of non-conforming children, and it breaks my heart to think that people think that we're for a particular agenda when we're really just for supporting all students. And this particular subgroup has been marginalized and bullied. And so I don't think that calling that out is wrong. And I think we reaffirm our support for all students by doing this.
Director Ramirez.
I echo what everyone's already said. I think this is a great first step for our board to continue to bring up resolutions that not only matter to us, but are really focused on student achievement and student wellness in our schools and within our school district. I always appreciate when we have parents who come and share not only their lived experience, but also their differing viewpoints. And I think for us as a board to continue to have students, student achievement, student wellness, student growth, student academics,
student mental health at the center of all the work that we do, I think is incredibly vital. And it's been something that I'm really proud of this board in doing moving forward.
Director Tyler.
I too agree with everything that has been said from our board. And I would like to just tie that back into our mission, and which our mission will be that every student has the knowledge, skills, and character to thrive. And the last two words is in a changing world. And we are in a changing world at this point. And we need to, as Director Stepp said, look at those who have been marginalized and who are at the edges of this new change and welcome them for their needs to be protected and assimilated and seen as equals in all ways. And so I think this is a big step for us to do that.
I too would echo everything that all of you said. I think that as a board, showing our support by passing this resolution is important. I want to again thank the district staff, leadership for bringing this forward, for doing this publicly, for sharing this in our community, because I think that it is super important for everyone to see that we don't just talk the talk, but we walk the walk, and we do what's best for our students day in, day out, and we are putting them at the forefront. And so I just applaud you all for doing that and for taking that step, and thank all of you, my fellow board members, for being here and supporting this. So now we'll call to vote. Sorry, I lost myself there for a second.
Aye.
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 Directors, you've just approved our resolution in support of LGBTQ+ students. Director Torres will now read our proclamation.
Thank you. Whereas the Roaring Fork School District Board of Education is committed to providing a safe learning and work environment where all members of the school community are provided a safe learning and work environment. And whereas Roaring Fork Schools District Board of Education Policy AC Non-discrimination, equal opportunity states the schools in the district are subject to all federal and state laws and constitutional provisions prohibiting discrimination on the basis of disability, race, creed, color, sex, sexual orientation, marital status, gender identity or expression, including transgender, national origin, religion, ancestry, or need for special education services. And whereas the Roaring Fork Schools District Board of Education recognizes that transgender, gender expansive, and LGBTQ+ students are more isolated, feel less supported, and are more subject to bullying and ostracism than any other group of students. And LGBTQ+ students are more at risk of depression, suicide, and harassment than any other population. And whereas the Roaring Fork Schools District Board of Education affirms that we have a moral duty as a school district to improve our inclusion of marginalized students and to ensure their well-being, and that we should work to respect each individual's worth and dignity, and to teach our students to live and work well together in a diverse society. And whereas the Roaring Fork Schools District Board of Education agrees that should any student, staff, or community member feel less than full membership in our community, it would be a failure to live up to our district's mission and values. And whereas the Roaring Fork Schools District Board of Education recognizes that we are in a moment of rapid societal change, and district students, teachers, and administrators are telling us they are confused about changing more regarding gender and gender identity, and that laws are also changing alongside society's growing awareness. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Roaring Fork Schools District Board of Education officially reaffirms its commitment to policies that support and represent the diverse students, staff, and families in our communities, and supports the district's work towards achieving that end by creating and implementing the toolkit for supporting transgender and gender expansive non-conforming students. And be it further resolved that the district shall broadly communicate the commitments of this resolution by posting this resolution online and distributing it to district staff and parents in all the predominantly used languages of the district. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Maybe I shouldn't have dismissed everyone before we.
That's what that was my thought too.
Sorry.
I mean, I was wondering like, but it was also them who didn't read our agenda. So
Right.
I don't know.
The next business in order is action on applications from Alexandra Briger and Brian Snow to serve on the District Accountability Committee. Is there a motion?
I'm sorry, I got lost.
I move that the board approve the applications from Alexandra Brager and Brian Snow to serve on the District Accountability Committee.
A second.
Where you're at.
Now time for board discussion. Each board member will have 1 minute to share comments. And then we'll begin with Director Step.
I'm assuming that the current District Accountability Committee vets these nominations before they bring it to the board, because I didn't see any like kind of background information on them. Is that a true assumption?
Yes. I don't know if we're supposed to do back and forth here, but they said the DAC receives applications and reviews applications, then they present who they want to us until they have their own voting body, which is the hope that they can get the minimum number of members from the specified categories laid out in statutes. They can become their own.
I have a question about what you just said, because it says we have 5 minutes for open discussion, but you said we're not allowed to go back and forth. Isn't that a discussion?
Well, we're supposed to do 1 minute each and then go to
Oh, 1 minute.
discussion.
I took my time from the 5 minutes. Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, I'm done.
I guess I'm the person that you're asking questions of right now. So, all right, Director Ramirez.
No, I mean, 2 extra DAC members is great. I hope that we continue to get more parents. I hope maybe the press or the media shares our DAC dates so that we can have more parents show up to our District Accountability Committee. But no, I really want to re-encourage our team to continue to promote it however possible. You know, maybe we give stickers to all the kids in the lunch line with like DAC meeting tonight. I don't know. We have to get creative. But yeah. Thanks, guys.
Director Taylor.
I think it's great that we're getting more people. I have a question about whether or not where it says this new parent is from Glenwood Springs Charter School, is that the same as Two Rivers Community School? And if not, what is Glenwood Springs Charter School?
Yeah, it's 2 versus 2.
Okay.
There isn't another one.
And so, so I think that is a great addition, because one of the things that we're supposed to have is a person who is from one of our 2 charter schools. But if we're looking at the other parent, I mean, I only have a name to look at, but Brian Snow seemingly fits into the same demographic as other parents that we have on this board. And we do not seem to be meeting the hope of having a demographic composition that represents our students. So that would be my concern.
I think that they are aware of that and trying.
I think so too.
Director Torres. And I did just forward you guys the actual applications. I'm sorry that wasn't sent out.
Thank you.
I got them late last week.
So mine was very similar to Dr. Taylor, but I hope that we continue with any effort. I know we don't have much control over who applies, but continuing to spread the word to parents to really do our best to represent the community in which we served on that committee. obviously as to the best of our ability, as well as, geographically as well. There's a large number that are in Basalt that would be great to also get more representation from both Glenwood and Carbondale. So
I think that this is an opportunity for us as school board members to jump in and help the DAC out also and tag some people that we think would be good members on the DAC, reach out to people within our contact circles and see if we can help them to fill these seats, because I think it's a hard thing to get buy-in for, right? I mean, we all serve in this volunteer role and commit a big chunk of time to this. And it's asking other parents to do something similar. They're meeting monthly. They have very specific things they're addressing. It's not the, sexy committee to be on, right? It's like down and dirty data and stuff that they really have to get into. So I think that we could help in that way, especially three of you have geographical districts down towards Glenwood. Sure. I think that it would be great if you could tag some people and send them toward the DAC, because I know they're doing what they can. I know the district is doing what they can to push this out and try to drum up engagement, but it's one of those tough ones to fill. It's an important one. They're getting mobilized and organized. They're going to come present to us November at our next meeting. The DAC will come and present to us, which is the way that the system should work. So now we have 5 minutes for an open discussion with each other. If there's anything else to be said on this.
I was just thinking that at the family advisory meeting with Joel at the middle school, he was doing like a challenge between all the students for attendance. I wonder if we could do like some sort of, I don't know, challenge of like
for parents.
Like if your parent signs up, I don't know, class gets a pizza party. We'll dunk your principal in slime.
The water tank.
I mean, the other thought is that we tap every SAC, right? You tap every SAC and say, who is a member of your SAC that would be great to serve on the DAC? And the DAC aligns with the SAC in these ways, and this is what we're asking for, and this is the commitment.
Yeah, I also think that there is like maybe not a real like understanding of what a DAC and a SAC do.
100%.
Maybe we should start like, maybe you need to do YouTube videos, Katie, of like, this is what a SAC is.
I'm not the YouTube star here. Somebody else on the board.
Dr. Rodriguez.
TikTok.
No, not I. No, I mean, I agree. I think that there's a space here for us to help. We have some, they also lost members. I don't know if you noticed on the memo on the list, they lost 1 or 2 members, but they have a couple others applying. So, like I said, it's not necessarily the fun stuff that they get into and that they're charged with getting into, but there's a small group that's committed to sticking it out. And I think if they could have more voices, specifically more diverse voices, it would be really beneficial for the DAC as a whole and for our district, because the hope is that the DAC does come and speak to us and let us know their thoughts and feelings on the UIP process, budgeting.
Do we have any ideas on the DAC? Does anybody know what type of system they're using to run their meeting, and if there's any translation services available at those meetings, and how that would work if somebody came in? Because as we saw that slideshow presented from Director Fairbanks, 50% or 40% of our language in this district's home language is Spanish. And so if we're trying to call from this group who are hoping to be part of a more diverse representation, then I think there's a good chance language is an inhibiting factor in the participation that we're getting and how that will play out for somebody coming in that situation.
I think, I don't know if Kelsey or Chief Beam can jump in here, but she's attended the DAC meetings from what I understand.
Yeah, so this year, they haven't been consistent with interpretation. Last year when they started in the spring and it was, I think maybe hybrid or all, I'm looking at Urania because she was providing support. They hadn't, And so there was interpretation provided. This year, I think we've had 2 meetings, and the first meeting there wasn't Zoom and there wasn't interpretation. And so I think your question is a good one, just making sure that that is happening. We supported that in the past and certainly can push for that. I think obviously Chris is open to it. They also adjusted their start time on the nights that the Family Advisory Council is the same night, hoping that if people show up to one, they would stay. That didn't really happen so much last time, but I mean, there were some new people. I don't know if they, we didn't have the big turnout that I think they were hoping for, but there were a few new folks. So.
Any other comments on this? Call the vote.
Call the vote. Dr. Stepp or Director Stepp,
Aye.
Director Ramirez.
Aye.
Goodness. Director Cooper.
Aye.
Director Tytler.
Aye.
Director Torres.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Directors, you've just approved the DAC applications.
And maybe I should ask this before, but what, do we know, is somebody able to tell me when those meetings are?
The DAC.
Yeah.
The second Tuesday of the month at 6 or 6:30, depending on if it falls on the same night as the Family Advisory. And it is on the district website.
Second Tuesday at what time? 6 to 6:30?
Typically 6. There's a few times when it starts at 6:30.
And that's held here?
All here. Yep.
DAC also has a webpage on the district website. The next business in order is action on the proposed regulation on public participation at board meetings, BDH-R. So is there a motion?
I move that the board approve the resolution. Wait. Is that a different?
That's the wrong.
I think that's in the wrong order.
Approve the proposed regulation.
I move that the board approve the proposed policy, BDH-R.
Is there a second?
Yes.
I second.
We'll now move into discussion. Director Ramirez.
No, I think this is a good opportunity for us to, address how you address the board. So kudos to the team for working on this.
Director Tytler.
I agree. I know we had this discussion in our work session, and I think it's important and it's timely that we're having this type of conversation. And so that we're not sitting up here questioning decisions when can this be done or can that be done. And so I think having a type of resolution that states what are our rules is important, and I very much support what we have come up with.
Director Torres.
Well, I appreciate that we had the opportunity to discuss many of these things in our work session. And I would just reiterate, which we covered in that work session, that this is available to the public when they sign up, so that they are just reminded of how this process works and just how the expectations we set forth and what we follow. I agree with Director Taylor. It helps us to support when we are in the midst of a board meeting and we're wanting to follow our norms and what the public can and cannot do when addressing the board at board meetings. So.
Ditto. Over the past couple of years, we've had a few major things that have come before the board. And so, and looking, I just wanted to remind everybody too, that there's no state statute that mandates that we have public comment. So this board is very opening to listening to public comment. And I love that this proposed regulation puts parameters around how we do that. And reminding everybody too, that even if they don't want to sign up or not, one of the first 15 people to sign up, they can always reach out to us through the online written comments. So we're accessible and we're listening, and this just helps us move forward.
Thank you. Echo all of your comments. And just, sorry. It's okay. I'm very grateful that we're putting this in place for a number of reasons, but as Maureen said, there's no statutory obligation, which means there's no specific guidance on how the public comment period is conducted, which I think can leave a lot of questions for the public. It can lead to misinterpretations based on decisions of the board. And I think having some clear guiding policy will really help not only this board, but hopefully future boards moving forward. We do have agenda items that draw large crowds. So thank you, Chief Bean, Dr. Rodriguez, for your help with this. Thank you for supporting us through getting this in place. And I'm looking forward to seeing it in action. Okay, directors, we now have 5 minutes for open discussion with each other if there's any additional discussion.
I think the only discussion I had was that I really do hope, and I mentioned this in the work session, that we work towards creating or putting all our policies into a board docs application that will not only show whoever wants to look at our policies, like the past history of them, but also like where, when, links to another. Because I do think that's important for, like, our policies should be easy to find and easy to read.
I agree with that. And I think that that is certainly the ideal, that they're easily accessible and readable for the public. I also, before we call to vote, just wanted to remind everyone that because this is a policy that is not statutorily required, this is a one and done reading. So this is the chance to voice anything else about it. And we had a healthy discussion during the work session. So I think we're all pretty satisfied, but this won't be back on the agenda. This is it.
And I want to clarify, we did decide that we weren't having them listed in numerical order, right? It's rather by bulleted point. I heard somebody mention earlier that they were happy about the prioritization when addressing the board, and it made me think they misinterpreted like I did. And I think a few others that it was going one, first, second, third versus
I think the
bullets.
The language changes that we made in that first sentence below that should clear that up. So remember the language in the first sentence below that referenced.
But as an easy visual is,
Yeah.
as much as I hope that people read the paragraph, sometimes just the glance.
Yeah, I don't think that it makes a difference in terms of the meaning. So if we want to bullet it instead of number it, I'm fine with that.
I'm in favor of bulleting it also because I think numbering it.
Look at that.
It's bulleted.
And I just want to also bring up what we also talked about in our work session is just making sure that there's a change in addition to this to the input form and how that then will coincide with this. So if we have that number 3 that talks about various views, that we have information for that.
Yep, and I'll work on that ASAP and send it before it's next slide.
And my only question, Kelsey, is like, if there were a parent here that wanted to sign up, like to do a, where would that, how would that?
There was a paper.
The sign up form was on the middle
Yeah.
table right below the mic.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yep.
paper. So it can still happen. Yeah, we'll have to adjust this too as well.
Yeah.
Well, actually, maybe not.
Thank you.
Is everybody satisfied? Call the vote.
Aye.
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 Oh, Director
Aye.
Directors, we've just approved regulation BEDH-R. The next business in order is discussion on proposed policies IFK, IHBK, IHBD, IHBEA, and Chief Park will come up for these, and we will move into discussion. And we'll begin discussion with Director Tyler.
I did have a question. Let me find it. I have a little bit of a question about the graduation requirements. It seemed like there was a problem with the concurrent enrollments and getting credit for those concurrent enrollments. And so am I understanding it correctly that these 10 credits that were given as electives are sort of given so that when they are taking these concurrent enrollments, they can count towards the graduation requirement? And then I had a question about I can talk in the 5 minutes we have after, but I highlighted a paragraph and I'm not seeing what I wanted to ask, but I'm good for now.
Director Torres.
Thank you for clarifying that, Director Tyler, because that was an area in which I know both Maureen and I had put on that board tracker that we wanted to learn more about. And that happens, right? When we pass something that we don't understand or really see the impacts until it's in place. I did have a question as far as the 10 general elective credits that now can include those concurrent enrollment courses, and how those, if let's say there is any alignment with how those, if a student, let's say, takes CTE classes and it equates to 11 credits, but one of them is an overlap, there's some flexibility in still using that concurrent enrollment that the school district would cover, or is that a different, I guess, set of criteria that the school district would not cover if it didn't meet the graduation requirements for a student? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Not only making this information, I have read the policy many times, and I think it's above and beyond they've completed those graduation requirements, they can still, but currently the way it's worded right now without any of the left, it actually excludes a lot of courses.
Okay. So will you, when you find that out, you'll let us know?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for understanding my question if I didn't. 8:30. Okay.
So by adding the 10 general elective credits, that will help out for the concurrent enrollment classes. But in here it states that, wait, I just lost it. It has been determined that no students would be negatively impacted with this addition. So I just want to make sure, like, the last graduation requirements we passed, and there was adverse reaction. Like, say a student's getting ready to graduate and they don't have those 10 electives, would there be any exception this year to still allow them to graduate?
Yeah, so we did the numbers and confirmed that the current students in our high schools have already earned or are currently taking or will have earned 10 electives credits by the end of the school year. The one question mark around some transfer students, because it does take time to get transcripts at times. And so most of the students who are transferring from the out of state or district will eventually have those transfer credits inferred. This was a very important question. And so the students who we are also making sure to keep a close eye on are students who transfer from out of country, because it does take the time to get them. It impacts about 10 students who have transferred recruited from out of the country. Counselors are aware of who they are, and they are not currently seniors, and so the counselors will ensure that their electives credits are scheduled in.
Good.
Director Ramirez. Now it was my turn here.
I'm sorry. I think it just hit all of us.
Including me.
Yeah.
So the only thing I wanted to mention, and thank you for the policy committee meeting to get a better understanding and to have the opportunity to really go through what we're gonna start leading up to this week. But I just want to restate, and I think it's just so important to state this, that in the last 6 years, we've updated the graduation requirements 5 times. And so I look forward to us doing this right and getting it right in the next year because we have to get it right for our students. But I also understand the urgency in us trying to find the best way right now to get our students to get high school diplomas. And, you know, I know we've been talking about this conversation, and I cannot stress enough the urgency that I feel in making sure that our students are actually graduating from our schools, because I'm really concerned with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to echo Director Ramirez on how helpful having the policy committee was. So Director Ramirez and I were able to do a first shot of these and get some questions answered and provide some feedback. And so that will be the purpose of the policy committee moving forward. And so we were able to address a lot during that time. I had a question just on IHBEA, the CLDE policy. And it's a pretty general question. It didn't occur to me until after reviewing the presentation that we had earlier. Just the terminology that was used in the presentation doesn't align with the terminology in this policy. And so I don't know if that's intentional, if there are, you know, if these are defined terms of emerging bilingual learners specifically as like a defined term at the state level, and the categorizations that we saw in the presentation from Director Fairbanks are within that, or if there needs to be or should be further alignment or explanation.
I think it's a good question. So like emerging bilingual is a more asset-based term for students, but the state uses still terms like English language learner, which is an interesting term because whether the only language you speak is English or not, you're also an English language learner. And so I think that's the difference. The language in the presentation align more with the language that the state uses.
Directors will now have 5 minutes for open discussion with each other.
I wanted to just follow up on a comment that Director Ramirez said that I thought was really powerful, that we not only want students to graduate, right? We want as many students to graduate. We also want them to graduate with a skill set to continue on in either career or college readiness. I think that is an area in which we've seen with this UIP and other areas of academic growth and readiness that we understand that a part of the education is getting these students to the next level, whatever that might be, career, college. And I think that this is a step forward by recognizing that these 10 elective credits can be in anything, whether they're concurrent enrollment or they're an elective class that is career exploration at the high school, financial literacy at the high school. That's huge, right? I really want us to really be recognizing that and looking at what CTE programming we can have offered with partnerships, whether it's CMC, BOCES, industries, career pathways. I feel as though it's our responsibility to not just help our students while they're in our schools, but to prepare them for what comes next. And that's what spoke to me in this policy.
And I think piggybacking off that, I think this new policy that is IHBK sort of talks to what you're talking about, and it sort of gives step by step that gives students assistance in designing what they might do if it's a workplace type thing or if it is a college track. And I think it sort of lays out different coursework and curriculum that you're talking about that can help with that.
Yeah, lots of school districts have pathways. Career communities kind of thing.
So having this new ICAP plan, I think the individual career and academic plan that starts at 6th grade and then 8th grade and 9th grade again, I think is going to give some more planning towards students to allow them to have that direction.
I think just for the team as a whole in the district, like what are our next steps in moving forward so that we're aligned to like our 6th graders, right? Being able to register, and then what does the rest of their middle school experience look like aligned to that? And what does the rest of high school experience look like aligned to that? I think prior we didn't really have an opportunity to talk about like CTE classes or how they could get those credits. But I mean, it's, like we've said multiple times tonight, it's a changing world. We need to help our students adapt to that. And I really think that, something that I've been hearing is a lot of students, a lot of Latino boys specifically, are leaving to join the workforce. They're going into construction, they're going into different areas. So what can we do as a district to help them navigate, but also get prepared for going into those fields? And how can we as a district also create programs or work alongside the college to get them ready for maybe owning their own business in construction?
When we give board reports later, I'll give an update to some of that. This really doesn't have to do with these policies, but things you said in here in your memo that we're going to do a deeper dive and look at all the graduation requirements. And like you said, we want to get it right. But things I've heard about with other districts is like kind of a work release thing so that they would get credit or something for if they do an apprenticeship or they do go to work. Or we've heard a lot of feedback on the capstone project, which is really great for some students, and some students really struggle. So is there an or, like they could do a capstone project, or they could do a research project, or they could do a job shadow, or just giving them some options. And again, we want to prepare them for their path, whatever it may be, and how can we, in these state requirements, but with some flexibility to reach all of our students. I'll ask my question on our other 1 minute follow-up.
I agree with what you're saying with that capstone, and having some alternative is important. And I also think as we're looking at doing this ICAP thing, where it says beginning in 9th grade, district personnel will develop and maintain individual career and being working with the kids. And I want to know, where does that time come from? Because it's putting something else on the plate. So if we're putting something else on the plate, maybe what is coming off?
We'll go back to the second round of 1 minute each. And we'll start with Director Taylor.
I do have the other parts that I was trying to figure out before. So it was on the CLDE memo part on IHBEA. And it says that the Roaring Fork Schools Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Education Department collaborates and communicates with colleagues and families to provide equitable, and it continues. I'm curious of how is it that the district and the CLDE department is collaborating with families? Like, I know there's conferences, but like where specifically are they collaborating with families? Because I'm at least unaware of like how that is specifically happening.
I think in addition to those conferences, I would and beyond any kind of broader district communication, I would like to get more detailed information from our schools and leaders in how that is happening.
Thank you.
Dr. Torres?
In a follow-up to the policy HBK. Sorry, I saw the little line, thought it was an I. With the 6th grade, My Colorado Journey. And it is state provided. It says will be encouraged to register with the state provided free online college planning and preparatory course. So whenever I see will strongly be encouraged, I question how that's, I'm thinking of a 6th grade class. Hey, everybody, I strongly encourage you to eat your vegetables. Well, I don't know how that will go over with my kid. So I really want us to really see what that means, and the subjectivity of strongly encourage in this environment. I would rather it be a part of the ingrained expectation when you're in 6th grade. And I'm even thinking about when these students go on to be able to vision, let's say our Latinx community that says, I can be a nurse. What does that mean? You know, when you look at those graduation numbers, I'd love for that to be representative of our community. And you do that in middle school.
I have a question, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this because you're new. But in hearing that, a lot of other school districts use the ICAP as a planning tool, and I've never heard of that here. And so like, why aren't we using them, and why did we get away from them? And again, I don't expect you to answer, but I'm glad to see that we're adding it back in.
It's been a discussion for a while with our counselors. So they have been, this is just a new policy that's required, but we have an ICAP task force. They have these conversations, all the high school counselors, where we're tracking everything. So it does exist, and I don't know how far back, so, because I'm new here.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to see we're bringing it back, and hopefully it'll be a successful tool to use for our students and creating those pathways.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on Director Torres. I think that's a good direction for policy IHBK, of the wording for the will be encouraged to be an ingrained expectation. I also wanted to ask on IHBA, and forgive me if I already asked this question, but for the I'm sorry, the spaces, the word is escaping me right now. Crossed out, strike through, there you go. The strike through section of this program shall provide appropriate English language acquisition. Was there a reason why that was taken out? I know on our document it says CASB recommendation, but did the staff feel that that was in alignment with our district?
One of the goals, I think here, was to actually put that in that first paragraph that includes the purpose statement, which was added to be comprehensive of those sections that were struck, and place it up front or at top, sorry.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I don't have anything further on these policies. Thank you for all of your work on them and getting us closer to updating these.
Can I have it's not a question for you. You're good. It's a question for you. Can I ask them?
Is it related to these policies?
Kind of. It's about the policy committee.
Oh,
So-
hold it until board reports.
Okay.
Actually, just have one quick question. It is about the policy. I just want to know, are our kids right now on the My Colorado Journey? Do we know?
On the what?
On the, like any of our middle schoolers, are they
Oh, is anyone using it?
enrolled?
My Colorado Journey.
Okay. Thank you. I have a 700.
Okay. We're all going. Okay, the next business in order is discussion on proposed policies, DBK, DBJ, DI, and DIE with Chief Markham. This is our finance policies, and we will move into discussion, and we will begin this round with Director Torres.
Hang on, the first one on the hard ones. Okay. I do not have questions at this time.
Director Stepp?
I don't have any questions at this time.
Director Ramirez?
I do have a couple questions. So in regards to the budget transfers policy DBJ and DI, I had a specific question, Director Markham. If we, just in like looking at both of these and like giving pretty much the superintendent the responsibility, how do these policies ensure that we as a board are receiving full financial transparency when it comes to like transfers happening between like our accounts internally that the schools are not in charge of, but our district office is in charge of? So I'll provide an example, and I'm sorry to do this, but like, well, I'm trying to find a place to mash like how we're giving fiscal responsibility to the superintendent as well as the accountability piece. And so the budget transfers don't have a money limit attached to them. So I'm assuming that any transfer that happens, we will be notified. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think you're incorrect. I mean, we report quarterly on kind of where our current budget and spending is at. And that's, you know, where we're actually delivering numbers to you. But as far as saying, you know, a school transferred $1,000 between their purchase services and their supplies, like we're not going to that level of detail for you.
And to clarify, I'm not talking about the schools necessarily, but within our district office, within the district itself, is that happening, or is there a way to solidify in any of these policies that should that happen, we are informed as a board?
I guess it would be covered under the program budget accounts section of that, of the transfers.
And so
I'm
would we?
still unclear on the
And
exact
actually,
question.
wait for my next minute, because my minute's over.
That maybe not notified in real time,
Right.
but notified as part of the board.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah, I think.
I would like time to think about that, just for burden on my staff and myself to track literally every single dollar that is spent outside of accounts, because budgets are wrong. That's the only thing I know for sure about my budget.
I think
it's just a plan instead of chaos.
Start my minute. I think where Director Ramirez is going is one of the things that both of us I think have learned through the education, my brain is done. The education finance courses that we're taking is that what they've advised is that there's a threshold dollar amount, right? Where the board is then notified if transfers of over $100,000 are being made, but the board should be notified that that's good practice to have at your district. I think that's where you were going with that, because I learned the same thing in the course that I was in. That's why I brought it up on the call. We were in the policy committee, because they were pretty adamant that was like, they brought it up multiple times. That's kind of a best practice to have in place at the district level. I don't have any specific questions on these policies besides that same one.
So can I ask a clarifying question? Are you referring to transfers between different funds or transfers between different line items?
Both.
Okay, so funds is covered, I believe, in the first paragraph under budget transfers, where you, the board, have to approve transfers between funds. So if we wanted to move money to the insurance fund, what have you, but we have to get that from you. We can't just do that unilaterally. So when you appropriate the budget, that's one of the things you're doing, is approving that transfer of funds.
And I think the more specifically what they advised is spending or binding yourself to contracts that you haven't already approved in your annual budget. Time's up. So we'll move into our 5 minutes of open board discussion and then loop back around for 1 more minute each. Dr. Tyler, did you?
I had a question.
I don't think they got a minute.
I didn't think I did either.
Oh,
but now I'm
sorry.
thinking maybe I did, so.
No, I don't think you did. My apologies.
But I'm like,
Like-
maybe I did and
had
I
your
passed and I
minute.
didn't remember again, so.
It's okay, all right, sorry. Director
should
Tyler,
have
you're
pressed
gonna,
button.
I apologize. I just stole it from you.
The only question I did have is like on the part on DBK, on fiscal emergencies, is like, is 2/3 of the board like a normal, like you always say 2/3, like, and with a board of 5, like how does 2/3 come up? Like, because we're either like 60% or 80%. And so like, I don't know, is like 2/3 just normal language?
That's my understanding here is that that is kind of a boilerplate. If we wanted to change it to fit our 5-person board, I think that's fine to the 3 or 4-person vote.
Yeah, and so I don't know. That was just my only question.
Because basically that defaults to 4-person
Right,
for our board.
which seems probably like sort of the right number, maybe, anyways. That's it. I was just curious.
Okay, so now we'll move to our 5 minutes. I apologize.
No worries.
Director Tyler.
Yeah,
Natalie,
I was-
Director Torres started. I just thought that I was the last one after you. That's my fault.
Only question I had from the conversation that you two were having was, I had a little bit different interpretation than Director Markham. Wanting to understand, like, I was hearing you saying that the district is spending money and that is without our authorization. And here I'm reading from what Dr. Markham was saying in DBJ, that that's the board saying that they can transfer money. And so I thought that was a different thing from what your question was, because you were asking if the district is spending money and that he was saying that this part was already there as protected, but how I'm reading it is that the district, the board members are asking to transfer money. So to me, that was a different understanding.
So the reason I ask is unencumbered monies from, like, even from our conversation, right? But when we're doing a transfer from like into our reserves, you know, or into our capital, like, we are supposed to approve that. When something happens between like a transfer from, like, we had an excess of money in this account and we're just going to transfer it right over into another line item that maybe is, it's not into like a reserves or capital. Like, I want to make sure that if, and actually, you know, Katie said 100,000, I would say 50,000. Like, I feel like there has to be some accountability on large sums of money that are being transferred. Not to say that we're not glad that there's extra money. You know, like, I would use an example of, like, if we had a grant and we didn't hire somebody in that position, that money has to go somewhere. And I just want to make sure that if it gets transferred elsewhere and doesn't stay within that grant, that we're notified as a board.
I guess
Sorry.
sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Bad example.
And that's,
yeah.
yeah. that's
So
the
I
big
would push
thing
for
that-
50,000 because I feel like 50,000 is like a bare minimum for me. Like, I feel like that is still a large sum. It's, you know, it's something that is still sizable. Like, you know, earlier we talked about the sick days, like, you know, that's 50,000, like, what that could support something. But I feel like it's a big enough number that we should be approving where that money goes.
And the reasoning behind that from the training that we were in is that when we approve the budget, the money's allocated to a specific expense, right? And so if that money's left over and it's being moved around, the board should be notified that it's being.
Well, we have in the past approved transfers into and out of reserves. So, I mean, that has been a practice. Like you were saying, I don't think it's line item by line item, but fund to fund.
But you're saying still that the board is approving it, which is, I think, different from what I hear
Approve them
here,
out of-
is that it was not approved.
Yeah,
Well, you're talking about two different things though, right? You're talking about from one line item to another line item, and what Maureen's talking about is from one fund to another fund, which already is included with board approval. We already we already do that,
Yeah.
right? And which is what Chief Markham was saying, but what it sounds like from this training that you've all gone through is as a best practice, there is a threshold in which when one line item has been approved to say transportation, for example, and we expect to spend 200,000, but because of shortage of bus drivers, we've spent 100,000, and we move 100,000 to a different line item like food or something. We've never approved that before because the underlying balance you're still going to spend X number of dollars. Where it is spent isn't necessarily an approval by us. I also recognize that I think that's a best practice, and whether it's 50 or 100, to also consider the burden and the administrative task, what that number might be, because I agree, 50,000 is a lot of money. Is it a lot of money in the budget of 8 million or 10 million, or you know what I mean? Like, or is that 100,000? I would be interested to hear what that training that you all experienced, what that would be for a recommendation.
It was really dependent on the overall budget, the size of the district, and it really varied from district to district, what the different practices were. Okay. We're gonna go back for one more round, 1 minute each, starting with Director Torres.
So now I have a question. So in talking about what that would look like as far as the administrative, how would that impact the administrative responsibilities of shifting those line items? I would imagine so that you wouldn't want to shift too regularly, because then there's no guarantee that it would be funded the next year if you're relying on surplus from something else.
I guess I still have a lot of questions about how functionally this would work, because we're not talking about just an over or under spend on, to your example, transportation, fuel. If fuel prices double in a year, we're going to overspend that account. But if fuel prices drop, we're going to underspend. And we might say we need more taxi services to get kids to school because we're short on bus drivers, and we still spend it within transportation. We can't move those dollars out of transportation because that's the transportation budget. That's governed by the program budget accounts. They have to be approved by both the program administrators and their direct supervisors. So basically 4 approvals internally is the way I read this. So we can't just take money from instructional and say, here's a bunch of money transportation without lots of deliberation internally and 4 approvals. So I'm still kind of struggling, like just the overages and underages due to just normal course of operations versus moving money. I guess I'm still a little confused on where we're drawing the line on those definitions. And then to use your point to a grants are written very specifically. We can't just take unspent grant money and do whatever the heck we want with it. Like, it still has to be spent according to how we wrote and were approved within the grants. Whether we send the money back, which we hopefully never do, or we roll it over the next year and try and execute our program again.
Well, and I mean, the board is fiscally responsible for the budget, but we are not operation managers. So, and what in your scenario is like fuel or tires or, like, I don't think we need to, like, we're looking at the fund balance and you say we spent this much in the transportation budget, and where you spend it shouldn't, I don't know. I don't think we want to get that deep in the weeds. But I don't know how much that happens. Like, how much are we transferring $50,000 or $100,000 around? Like, I can't imagine it happens that frequently.
Between different programs, never, since I've been here. Within programs, certainly if we're having a hard time hiring staff, we might hire tutors, which is a different line item, but it's still in the same spirit of giving students instruction and the highest quality instruction that they can receive. We're not taking that money and, buying TVs or, putting it to tires. So.
Director Ramirez.
Yeah, and to that point, I do want to clarify that it's not about getting into the weeds, but rather making sure that as a board, we are being fiscally responsible and that we are understanding like where we are allocating our funds. And so, you know, like the example you just used of like, you know, we decided to use tutors instead of you know, staff that we weren't able to hire. In my opinion, from what I've learned, if it's over $50,000, then we as a board have a responsibility to say, can you show us data to prove that the tutors that you are wanting to offer will be the supplemental support that the students need instead of the teachers that we had wanted to receive. So like in from what I've been understanding, it's like just checks and balances of like making sure that we are, you know, that our budget is reflecting the values and the growth that we're asking the district to be in alignment with. And that took my time with it.
So I hear, Jasmine, what you're saying, and I think there's merit to that, but I think there's also some merit to, we need to let the professionals who are doing their business do what they think is best for the situation. And I think at some point we need to like recognize that they've well thought this out and that they're not like siphoning off money. And so in some sense, I think we need to give them a little bit of leeway instead of bringing it back to the board, because now that can be like a 2-month out process by the time it comes back to us and goes back, and then they decide what to do with their money. And so I think at some point we need to say maybe within their program, they do have that latitude. And then 2 other things. One's, you were talking about how budgets don't change from one program to another, but under this, from as CASB is recommending, it's saying it can with just the chief financial officer or the superintendent's okay. And so that's a little different from what I'm hearing. And then my question is, did you want to say something to us, Chief Markham, that you were starting to say something and then stopped?
So under policy DBJ, the last program budget accounts.
Yes.
Transfers. Transfers between programs must have the approval of each program's manager's immediate supervisor. So the way I read that is each program manager would agree to it and then go to their direct supervisor.
Right, but that's still not coming from the board, which is what I'm hearing.
I'm saying it's not just one person like taking money or me just deciding to move money. Like there's multiple people that need to be notified and discussed amongst.
I totally hear what you're saying, Dr. Heitler, and I understand the potential burden. And I think that's why there is some threshold amount, right? So it strikes a balance. Because as board members, we have an obligation to the community, to the public dollars, to make sure that they're being used, as you know, everybody knows. And I think that there is this burden of knowing where large sums of money are going, right? And it's not about controlling where they're going, it's about knowing when these shifts happen. And I think that's where that best practice comes in, because how do you enact as a board member your, you know, what you see, your vision for the district? It's, you have very specified things you have power and control over, and one is the budget. So as Jasmine was saying, like how you allocate dollars becomes very important. And so I think that's where that comes from. It doesn't come from any idea that anybody's siphoning off money or anything untoward's happening. It's just an oversight. That is the function of the board, right? It's this accountability piece. Okay, we did 2 rounds. So that concludes this agenda item. Thank you, Chief Markham. There's no vote tonight. That's the reading. We're going to jump into board reports and comments. And we will begin with Director Stepp.
So my question about your policy subcommittee, I think it's great. I think it's needed. I'm glad that you guys were able to do a deep dive into them. I'm wondering if we can add that into a working session item that you can tell us what you learned before we go into this open session. The other report I have is, I think I talked about this last time, but there's a group in the Valley that is being led by the people from Aspen Community Foundation Cradle to Career Initiative. It includes the Colorado River BOCES, CMC, Glen X, Youth Entity, CareerWise. I think maybe one or two other. And we just had a meeting, right? That's why I was late for our working session. I'm not done yet, am I? I thought this was all board reports. We only have a minute for board report. So the discussions are moving forward. We're creating, so talk about my Colorado journey. They want to create a database of opportunities. So whether it's career or college. And my point is, we don't want to recreate the wheel. There's tools out there like my Colorado journey. So that's kind of where the conversation was today. We came up with a vision and a mission, and everybody working together for the benefit of kids. So if a kid comes and say, hey, I want to be a welder. Okay, well, this is the path you take, and these are the training programs that are out there, and here's a career, so it's really interesting conversations, but the school districts need to be involved, and yeah, that's it. Oh, we have a BOCES board retreat next week that Dr. Rodriguez and I are going to, so we'll have more to report next time.
Thank you. Director Ramirez.
I was going to mention, so the conversation we were just having on finance, for me, it's the deep dive. So I've already done the certificate in education finance. I'm doing the deep dive into our budget. And so I just wanted to mention, like, if any of you guys are interested in that, I'd be happy to connect you to the Georgetown finance person who would help you guys to either find a scholarship or get you in a class, because I think it's really valuable and it's helped me a lot. And then the only other thing I was going to mention was Prop FF is happening, and I know we didn't get to push a resolution on it, and I apologize if I wasn't more on top of that, but I just think it's really important for us to, in our spaces, to help further along that conversation on free school lunches for all Colorado kids. And that's it.
Thank you. Dr. Tyler?
I guess that I would just like to say, I have a question a little bit about the 1 minute, 5 minute format that we have for this part of our agenda. That I think if we're doing board reports and somebody, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'm good. Thank you. Bye.
Director Torres.
Oh man, I was ready to go in a minute. Okay, so
I'll talk faster.
I know. Let's see if I can do this. No, so I met with Brianda, and we for the Mountain Voices project. I'm very excited about moving to that next, to go into the next meeting. We covered, I mean, it was supposed to be like a half an hour to an hour coffee meeting, and I think I could have stayed there all day. It was something I'm really excited to share with the rest of the board, what we can do with partnerships and really understanding, I think, a greater understanding of what they're doing, the advocacy for organizations to have a platform to come together and promote each other's work. I mean, if there's the housing projects, that's a weird way to put it, but the housing initiatives to more affordable housing, well, if they need support to get that message out, and how do we really intersect and collaborate a lot of these different advocacies, nonprofits, and movements and initiatives throughout this valley in the community. So stay tuned for more. So it's very exciting to just be a part of that group. I also attended the Roaring Fork Schools Foundation meeting. And so they're getting rejuvenated as far as coming back together. Rob Stein's on that group, and he, I think, was going to be reaching out, if he hasn't already, to Dr. Rodriguez to see how that participation will work if he continues in that role, if it's a attendance by Dr. Rodriguez in addition or in lieu of what Rob was doing. So it was really an introduction. I now have a board seat officially. I was voted onto that board in the first meeting. They're like, oh, by the way, we're voting you on, and do you want to be the new vice president or president? I'm like, no, can I just want to, I'm just starting as the board member, which I think is really shows testament that they're ready to move forward with more work. So I'll be reaching out to some ideas that we had previously discussed on what they can do with that. So that's exciting. Another last but not least, there is an initiative for the NCII with his rural guided pathways. We talked about it tonight with the pathways with concurrent enrollment. We'll be extending an invite to Dr. Rodriguez to partner with the Roaring Fork School District with this nationwide initiative that is funded by Ascendium Group and is really focused on collaborating between school districts and institutions of higher education for rural guided pathways so that students starting in high school can see the end goal of a career pathway and make partnerships so that once they graduate, they have a direct line of employment upon completion. So it's really exciting. It's coming. I want to make sure the board was aware that an invitation has been extended or will be extended soon for Dr. Rodriguez to participate. And it's fully covered to attend the conferences as well financially. So there's no financial obligation by the school district.
Awesome.
Sorry, I can do that in a minute. Right.
Sounds like we need to talk.
Yes.
Kind of gave my report earlier. So we're out of time. I'm gonna stick to it. All right, we'll now move on to our final agenda item, appreciations. And we will begin with Director Ramirez.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate my appreciation earlier. I went to our Glenwood Springs Middle School Accountability Committee and we received this document, which I was told Ms. Kelsey, Chief Dean, had shared in English and in Spanish. I was like, we are killing it tonight. I was so proud of us. And I really appreciated Joel's, Principal Hathaway's effort to make sure that all of the parents were notified via his Sunday message about it. And so I really, even in just having the conversation and having conversation with parents who were present, I could hear there was like a very concerted effort to make sure that he had parents show up and that also the intentionality of the meeting was not wasted. And so kudos to him and his team. Kudos to our team for making sure our principals had this for their meeting. I thought it was great.
Dr. Tightler?
I would like to echo what Dr. Rodriguez said in his opening remarks of a thank you to teachers this week who have been taxed heavily meeting after school on multiple nights to do these conferences. And it's always a super long week for teachers during conference times. And so just to appreciate them for their extra time and effort.
Director Torres?
Well, I was gonna go with the teachers with these long hours. I saw some of those sign-up sheet offerings and I was like, wow, that is commitment right there. I want to also give a shout out and appreciation for our transportation team as we get to bad weather, and they are doing a tremendous job keeping our kids safe and getting them to schools. So thank you for all that team does.
Director Stepp?
I want to appreciate all the parents and students and community members that came out again. in support of something that they're passionate about and sharing their voices. I wish they would come and support us when we go through all these details. But hey, kudos to them for showing up tonight, even when the weather's not great.
I wanted to first echo the appreciation for the teachers, specifically at Basalt Elementary. All the teachers were asked to do 2 conferences, and so they are doing team conferences. Both the English and Spanish speaking teacher were at every single conference for every child, so they had double the workload this year. But as a parent, it was wonderful to have them both there and be able to talk to both of your child's teachers. And then I also wanted to, across the district, top to bottom, thank everybody that's taking the extra effort to put out information about our district via social media, because I could see there's been a huge uptick of that this school year. And I think that it's done a lot to keep community informed, to bring parents in, to keep students up to date. It's also just entertaining and engaging at times. So thank you to everybody that's helped to lead that and do it and make it happen. Because I think it's a tool that we can use to connect with the community. So thank you. All right. If there's no further business and there's no objection, this meeting will be adjourned. It is 9:18 p.m.
We've been so spoiled.
I'm
with
really
these
sorry I
early-
called a break before the resolution.
That's all right.
I was like, that's what we did last time. That's what we should have this time, right? And then I looked at the last one and